Marriage on a Tightrope. I'm Katie.
I'm Allan.
And we're still married. Allan, we have an excellent interview that we did last week with Andrew and Kaity Maughan.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought they were quite pleasurable? Not pleasurable.
That's not the right word. Pleasant.
Pleasant? Yeah, that works.
They had some great insight, great things to say, and a really interesting perspective on mixed faith marriage, since they currently are in one now. But before we get to the interview,
we had a couple of announcements. So one announcement I wanted to make is Andrew and Katie, their interview was the first of a number that are set up through Calendly. So on Calendly, in the show notes on this episode, and we'll try to remember to put it on the show notes for all the forthcoming episodes. But if you are interested in sharing your story, you can go onto Calendly and just book a time with us. All of our availability is on there. After you book a time, we usually send an email out to say, hey, what's your brief summary of what you want to share? We've got a number of couples. We're excited. We're interviewing an actual therapist tomorrow who's also in a mixed faith marriage. So that's kind of a double bonus. We're excited to interview him.
Yeah. So if you would like to do that, go to Calendly and schedule yourself to be on the show. Also, we wanted to announce that today is the last day to get $50 off.
Today being December 1st.
Right. Today being Tuesday, December 1st. After today, the prices go up $50. So if you would like to join us for our January class, or you would like to sign up for kind of a do-it-yourself model, either way, you get $50 off through today. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us through email, Instagram, Facebook, all the usual channels.
To sign up there, you can go to marriageonatightrope.thinkific.com. That's THINKIFIC.com. I think the dark horse in the three products that you see on the three different courses, I should say, on Thinkific that you see, is the Sex and Intimacy course. Currently, it's just before Christmas time, and some couples may be looking at the costs of both the do-it-yourself and the January class and saying, like, how do I fit this into a Christmas gift? Personally, I think it's an amazing gift. But the $97 Sex and Intimacy Masterclass is really, really good value because we have 2 hours with Natasha Helfer teaching by herself on sex and intimacy. And then everyone that signs up for that will be invited to join us for a 90-minute Q&A, which will be coming up in February.
And if you do sign up today, not only do you get $50 off, but you automatically get Sex and Intimacy that is included
right, in
with
both
it.
of those. That's correct.
Right. So if you would like that, sign up today. It's your last day. And we are excited to see those who have already signed up who will be joining us in January.
Before we get to the interview with Andrew and Katie, we'd like to ask for your donations. We're coming up on year 4 of Marriage on a Tightrope. One thing that Katie has said is that she has felt called as much as any other calling to really put in her all and our all into this podcast. And what we always talked about being mission president and mission presidents together. And we're coming up on 3 years of that. Is this the mission that you had in mind?
I think it definitely has a bigger impact than what I would have ever thought.
Oh, that's great.
Don't you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's tender to hear you say that.
Yeah, I do. I do feel like it's been a mission. But you guys, we're 3 years and we're released, right?
Yeah, here's what it comes down to. We absolutely see the value of what this podcast is doing for mixed faith marriages. Many couples come into the space, and within a couple of years, you process through it, and you've learned how to live in a mixed faith marriage, and you move on. But there are always couples coming into this space, and for us, we're one of the couples that has processed it. For a long time, doing the podcast was therapeutic, and there are still moments that we still need to talk about, and we hit record when we need that. But for the most part, we are doing this podcast now exclusively for you, the listener. And it's not only for us anymore. We've moved on not as far as the church goes, but as far as the pain, the very real difficulties in a mixed faith marriage.
I think
we've processed through much, if not most of that.
Right. I think anyone that listened to our healing episode, which, by the way, thanks for the response. I think we got a huge response in people who really, really loved that episode and are really looking forward to get to a place of healing or have been healed themselves. And I think that you can hear us in that episode talk about where we are today versus where we were 3 years ago. And there has been a lot of healing that has gone on.
So this is a call. If you have been a listener for 1 week, or what's 52 times 3, 156 weeks, this is a call for you to donate to Marriage on a Tightrope. If you've benefited from this, it is not only appreciated, but it is needed. We spend a lot of our time and effort. Just to give you an idea, right now it's 10 o'clock at night. If you listen really carefully, you might hear our 2 younger kids in the neighboring room. This is when we do Marriage on a Tightrope. We put the kids down and we jump over into my office, the room where I am stuck for 10 hours during the workday. We go back into that room, and if we're conscious enough, we'll hit the hot tub and go to bed afterwards. If you can find it in your hearts and in your wallets to donate to us, it truly is needed, and it helps us really justify the time away from our family that it takes to make this podcast happen on a week-to-week basis. Not to mention the effort that we put into the Facebook group, the emails, the couples that we meet up with for dinner, the events that we put on, the developing the workshop, and all of those things. We want to keep this going because we see the true value in it. Not to mention that many couples, you're saving 10% by not paying tithing. Why not take just a few percent of that and throw it to Marriage on a Tightrope?
Oh my gosh. Are you telling people to not pay their tithing?
No, I would never tell people not to pay their tithing.
Blasphemous.
No, I would never do that. A lot of couples, they want to be charitable with their 10%. And so they set 10% aside. We do that. We set 10% aside, but you don't always have an idea of where to do that with. So please, if you would like to donate, you can go to marriageonatightrope.org. There's a donate button there. We also can accept Venmo. On the marriageonatightrope.org, that's the best way to set up a recurring donation, whether that's $5, $50, or $50 million. Jeff Bezos. Maybe he's in a mixed faith marriage. No, he's divorced.
No, he's divorced.
It didn't work out for him.
No, it did not.
I would like to think that a Mormon mixed faith marriage had something to do with it, but I'm doubtful.
Nope, not even
not even a little.
Not even a little bit.
I don't think he's hurting.
So you can also, like Allan said, donate to our Venmo at Marriage on a Tightrope. And we want to thank, there are a number of you who are consistent donors to us. And we just want to say thank you. You know, the small to larger amounts, every little bit makes us just excited to do more and put more effort and work out there for all of you. So thank you for your past support, and we really appreciate your future support to continue to help us make the best out of what mixed faith marriage is.
All right, so let's get to the interview with Kaity and Andrew Maughan. And now we would like to welcome to Marriage on a Tightrope, Kaity and Andrew Maughan. Welcome on, guys.
Thanks for having us.
We're super excited to have you. Now, we can see you. We don't release the videos here, but back on your wall, you have quite a relevant mixed faith marriage quote. Let your faith be bigger than your fear.
For the record, that was put up before.
Yeah.
Yes,
but you've kept it up.
It's up. And honestly, like that could be, forget the religious overtones, that could be a marriage quote. Yeah. There's a lot of fear in mixed faith marriage, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk. We're going to talk fears eventually, but we would love to get to know both Kaity and Andrew. First of all, we asked the same question of everybody. What does it mean for you to be all in? Oh, sorry, that's the wrong podcast. What?
It's definitely not this podcast.
Why did you crazy kids want to come on to Marriage on a Tightrope?
Was it my idea?
I don't remember.
Someone made the appointment.
I know. Well, we both sat down and made it. We kind of, I think for one, we wanted to really, maybe this is selfish. We wanted a way to be able to share it with family and friends and not have to like rehash it every time or like have this like deep, let's sit down and have this conversation, you know?
Yeah.
So
and
I think that's part of it.
I do feel like as we listen to your podcasts and other podcasts of people going through similar situations, we've just felt like this is awesome. There's a community of people who are going through the same thing that doesn't get talked about at church or at general conference at all, you know? And it's something that I've learned way more people are going through than I thought was possible. And so we found this community, and I'm not on social media. I use Katie's login, and then I just kind of spy on things now and again. And so I get to see people's stories. And since I don't really have an outlet on the internet, I guess, to interact and share my stories, I kind of have to do it through her. But I thought if there is an opportunity for us to get our story out there, let's do it. I mean, if we can, we've been helped by your podcast and the stories that have been shared. So, you know, why not see if we can share our story, and some people might connect and be helped as well. So.
Yeah, I think I'm so glad you guys came on, because everybody may have similar threads through their stories, but everyone's unique as well. And one person's story will hit home to, you know, a listener that listen to us all the time, and then we'll feel connected to your story. So we're so glad to have you here. We're going to dive right in. And the first thing that we wanted to kind of go over is both of your backgrounds.
Your favorite candy bar. Oh.
And you can, I guess you
Sorry, yeah, backgrounds. That makes more sense.
Backgrounds. So, Andrew, if you want to start, maybe you can tell us about your upbringing in the church, and then we'll have Katie tell us about hers.
Andrew, what's your maiden name?
It is Kensru.
There we go. Perfect.
Andrew Kensru. So I was born into the church. I was raised in Riverton, Utah, and which is insane to think about now. There was like a giant alfalfa farm behind my house, and we had horses, and now it's like I don't even recognize it when I go there. But I was raised in the church. We were super devoted. When I was really young, I feel like we went to church every Sunday, but then when there's like state conference, it was like state conference was like a bye day, you know? It's like
free day.
Like it's optional. But then when we got a little bit older, I feel like my parents got a little more serious, and we started going to state conference, which we realized they were sparing us from a basically 2-hour sacrament meeting.
Without bread and water.
Yes, with no intermission.
Right.
I mean, really, who wants to take little kids to a state conference?
That's
do
tough.
not blame your parents.
Yeah, being a parent of a 6 and a 4-year-old now, I understand a little bit more. But yeah, so we super believing. My mom's parents were converts, and she was super strong as well. And so I was raised in that. And as a kid, I was just I've always been super literal. Like I very much need to see how things work, and I need to be able to imagine it in my mind. And so I remember asking a lot of questions when I was a kid, and I remember specifically driving. I think we were driving past the Jordan River Temple one day when I was little, and I asked my mom, "What's it going to be like when Christ comes again? Like, what's it going to be like? What's it going to look like?" And she said, there'll be, trumpets and light coming through the clouds and all this stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, it was so hard for me to imagine, even as a kid. I was just like, why would there be trumpets? Like, why? I just couldn't imagine it happening, even though I'd seen so many movies and stuff. Like, it was just, I wanted to be able to imagine in my mind, like, how it would happen, And so I've just always been a very very critical that way. I remember thinking many times in sacrament meeting when my mind would just wander, what happens if I die and this is it? And it's not what I thought it was, and then I was like, no, that's too scary. Like, I'm so glad that I've got knowledge of the gospel, because I know where I'm going after I die, and it's a lot happier than just there being nothing, But I remember thinking those things even as a young kid. I remember thinking that it was, when people would say like, oh yeah, like my mom or my dad doesn't believe in God. Like, I remember thinking like, oh, that's so sad. Like, what do you tell your kids when they ask you, what's going to happen after this life, or, why certain things happen and they don't have the answers? Like, I'm so glad I have all the answers, in the church, and so I was a pretty good kid. My mom says I was a model child until I was a teenager.
Your wife's giving you the side eye.
Until I was a teenager.
That's a story I heard.
What? No, she ask her any day. She'll tell you that I was the angel child, because Matthew. Yeah,
Matthew. It's always Matthew.
He gave her a run for her money, but then he became a teenager, and he was a really good teenager. So anyway, so I was kind of a punk. I rebelled as a teenager. I never got into drugs or alcohol or anything. That never interested me. I have OCD, and I just like control, and so the idea of any kind of substance that's going to alter my mind is terrifying, because then I'm not behind the wheel, but as a teenager, I got into trouble with all my friends. Like, I don't know if I should say certain things that we did that were definitely illegal, and probably, yeah. So we got into trouble. I had different.
You don't have to tell those stories.
I know. I had different girlfriends at young ages as a teenager, and it's just a bad deal. And then when I was 17, I was almost 18, and I told my parents I didn't want to go to church anymore. And we had a big blowout, and we had like months of fighting, and I didn't really have any good reason other than I wasn't sure. I was just like, I just can't imagine all this stuff being real. Like, I just can't see it. So we fought for a while. They forced me to go, and it was just, they finally realized that it wasn't a good thing to force me, and they decided not to force me to go anymore. And then I met a girl who was a really good influence on me and helped me to basically, she asked all these questions about, why I stopped going to church or why I didn't believe. I didn't really have any good answers other than I wasn't sure, And so she encouraged me to read the Book of Mormon and pray and, go to church again and do all these things. And so I did, and we started dating. And so, that's always really good motivation too, right? And she basically helped me go on a mission. I went back to church and decided I wanted to share my experience of having kind of fallen away from church and going back. And so I went. I served in Orlando, Florida, and it was awesome and difficult, and I made lots of friends. I'm still really good friends with a lot of them today. And that's kind of how I met Katie, was because of, not because of my mission, but because of missionary work and because of missions, right? My little brother served a mission in New Jersey, and that's where my wife served. That's kind of how we met.
Yes.
Nice. That was a good... Go ahead, Katie. Sorry, go ahead.
I just was saying, and that gets us to us.
Right.
No,
well done.
That's a really good synopsis of, I guess, were your parents just really like excited and happy that you were coming back and going back to church? Like, what was their response to you?
So they were all stoked. I remember right before I went on a date with my girlfriend at the time that was, helping me get back in the church, that I was like trying to leave. I think I was trying to get the keys to the car because I didn't want to take my date in my 91 Dodge Caravan. So I was trying to get the keys to the Civic so that I could go. And my dad wanted to know where I was going. I didn't want to tell him that I had this big cheesy date planned to drive to the top of this mountain and watch the sunset and dance. Yeah, we danced in the parking lot. I know. It was.
Doesn't dance.
I don't dance. I didn't want to tell them my plan, and so I was like, if I just tell you that I decided to go on a mission, will you shut up and give me the keys? And I think my aunt and uncle were there too for whatever reason. They were just like, "Oh my gosh!" and they gave me the keys, and I just ran out the door.
That's one way to shut them up.
Oh, that's great.
So they were stoked, and I think when we got back, we ended up talking about it. And they could see the change in me. They knew that I was, obviously not as much of a punk as I had been the last few years, and so they were stoked. My dad especially was stoked. He loved his mission. He talked about it every day, and so they were very happy to see me turn around and not have to be fighting me every day. So
yeah. I want to hear, Katie, let's go to you. I want to hear a little bit about same thing, your upbringing in the church and what that was like for you.
Okay, so I was born in California, Bay Area. My parents met there. My mom got married 2 weeks out of high school. Very young. My dad's best friend and next door neighbor was a member of the church. My grandparents were Baptist. We had a lot of different religions, I think, in my family. My parents ended up converting.
Wait, what was your mom before and what was your dad before?
My mom's family was Catholic. I don't know that they were like super religious, like going to church, like super religious, but they were Catholic. I know she was raised in the Catholic Church. And then my dad's parents were Baptist. From the South, so Southern Baptist, but had moved to California. And my parents converted after they got married, but before we were born. So I grew up in California. I was the only member of the church in my not in my elementary school, but in my class in elementary school, from kindergarten to 5th grade. But I grew up, we'd have family dinners and we'd say grace and we'd all hold hands and we'd stand in a circle, and I'd go with my papa to his church to do his secretarial clerical stuff that he'd do. Sometimes we'd go to different services at their church. It was just kind of
Baptist church or the Catholic church?
The Baptist church.
The Baptist church. Okay.
Oh, I did go into the Catholic church a couple times I remember going with one of my friends. I'd stay the night at her house. And her family went to this Catholic church that was like right around the corner from our stake center. And I'd always seen it, but I'd never been inside. So I remember going to service with them there one time. So I grew up in this, I don't know. I had I guess it was a mixed faith family, right? Yeah. Just not a mixed faith immediate family. We moved to Las Vegas when I was 11. So just before I went into middle school. We called it middle school there. I don't know, here in Utah, you guys have weird names for things.
Hey, I claim California still, so.
Okay, junior high, I don't know. Anyway, and even, in middle school, we had, there was a larger LDS community. I went to school with a lot more people that I went to church with, and that was really cool. But I also, as I went to high school, I got to know more people that weren't members of the church. I even went to youth groups every now and again with other friends of different faiths. I remember talking about God. I remember having discussions like at lunch with certain friends about God, sometimes heated, but it's fine. But just to the point that I think my idea of God is different, or was different than maybe how Andrew grew up. There's different things that we've talked about over the years. And I'm like, that's how I've always thought God was. That's not what the church taught. I don't know. Maybe I just have a different idea of it.
What are some examples of that? Like how you view God versus maybe how an Orthodox Mormon would view God?
I think that's a really good question. And it's kind of hard to put myself in an Orthodox position right now.
Right. Well, it's like you've never really been there.
Yeah.
But I think, and I have been in certain ways, but sure. To the point that I was very much we do what the prophets say. We're obedient exactly. That's how the blessings come. But I think I've always believed that God loves me, which isn't, I guess, unorthodox. But I don't see him as like this judge that's just like, oh, you did wrong, better do better, you know? But I see him as someone who's coming, that Christ is coming and sitting beside me and saying, hey, I know this is really hard right now, and I'm going to love you through it.
Did you see him as that for your Catholic and your Baptist family as well? Like that he loved your family, whatever religion they were, despite them not being Mormon?
That's an interesting question, because I think I did, and I was thinking about this today, I did have in my mind, like, you're there, but you're not there yet. You know, like you have to be a member of my church to like really be there and really be saved. But like, I know that God loves your effort, you know, like, and that sounds so judgmental, but I don't think that I meant it. It really was inside my head, but I don't think that I meant it in like a mean way, like, oh, you're just not there. But I remember really wanting on my mission for my grandma to just like read my emails or just to read my letters, you know, like I just want you to like know what we know and, you know, love what we love. And so there was an element of like, he loves you so much and I know he's there with you, but like, he's just not there with you as much as he is with me.
You don't have the Spirit.
And don't feel bad about that, because that's welcome to religion.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Everyone thinks that they have the special thing, right?
Yeah, that is a very good point. But so growing up, I ended up graduating high school, going to BYU, thinking that I was just going to get married. Super mad that I turned 21 and I wasn't married yet, because I'd always said, if I turn 21 and I'm not married, I'll go on a mission. I remember my bishop like trying really hard to get me to date people. And I was like, look, I want to get married, but now I'm going on a mission. So now just let me go on a mission. And yes, Andrew's brother, Matthew, and I were in the MTC together. He was 6 weeks ahead of me, but we were in the same district. And I was the only sister out of those two districts that went to New Jersey with like 10 or 11 or 12 different elders. So they were like brothers to me. Every time we'd see each other on our mission, like we were just really close. And so when I came home through another like a mission friend, I met Matthew's family because he was still on his mission. And that's how I met Andrew.
Here's a question for both of you. On your missions, did either of you feel like, I don't know, what was your experience? Was it overall a positive experience? Was it, I know that it's hard and it's good, but I think some people can get wrapped up. I think, Andrew, you mentioned like some of these OCD tendencies. Did those come out on your mission? And what did that look like for you?
So to give you an idea, I had no idea what the rules were, other than like, I heard that you're not supposed to like hug girls, right?
Or hold babies, right?
Or hold babies, or shake the babies.
No shaking babies. I think that's a general human.
I think
that's a parenting rule.
Today.
Yeah, but yeah,
I guess
not just on the mission.
So I remember getting set apart, and then one of my best friends, Jason, came over and like went to give me a hug, and I like gave him a handshake instead. Because I was so weird. I was just like, I'm going to be the best missionary ever. And I was like determined to be completely obedient and everything. And I got to the MTC and they started, showing us how we talk about things and how the lessons are structured. And I just remember having kind of a hard time with it, because I was like, wait, we got to go tell people that we're the only true church? Because like in my mind, growing up in it, it's like all I knew, right? Like I wasn't like Katie. I didn't grow up with like, I had one friend who grew up going to a different, it was like a non-denominational Christian church, and he's one of my best friends, but that was it. Everybody else was a member of the church, whether they, were super strong or not, but everybody was a member. And so I didn't really connect the dots. Like, even though the girl that I was dating helped me read the Book of Mormon and find out if it was true or not, in my mind, it was like, I don't know how to describe it. It was just like, oh, well, this is truth, and this is what we need to teach everybody. But then when I was in the MTC, it sounds like I was an idiot, but I just was like, we've got to tell everybody that they're wrong. And so that kind of freaked me out.
Right.
I remember asking them, like, what do we say when we knock on somebody's door? And they didn't really have a door approach. They just were like, well, say whatever comes to your mind. And I remember really freaking out my MTC teacher because I was just very blunt. Like, I'm not a salesperson. I just say whatever comes out of my mind. And she was very, very caught off guard by a few of my door approaches.
And do you remember any examples?
I don't know. I think she was role playing a very hard to get investigator at the door. And I think I like pushed my way into the door that we were, role playing at, and was just like, well, if you don't let us in to hear the message, then you're going to hell. So you better let us in. And she was just, you can't say that. And so I remember very quickly my, exact obedience kind of fell apart because I just realized that like our message is going to be really difficult to get into people and to get people to really listen to, because I'm like, nobody's,
especially in the South.
Yeah, especially in Florida where everybody has read the Bible and knows it. And so I had a great experience though. I would say that my overall experience was positive. There's definitely plenty of difficult things that happened and that I went through, and I went through depression. Like the 1 year mark, I feel like is just hard for a lot of missionaries. And I remember there being a few months right in the middle that was really, really tough, but I'd say it was an overall positive experience. I mean, I love the people that I served and met and I'm still friends with today. So other than the kind of sales approach that I just never seemed to master, I think it was good.
Katie, was it more comfortable for you salesmanship wise because you have already had these conversations with family members and you're used to talking about God during lunchtime with friends? I mean, was that sort of natural for you?
No. I think the thing that was comforting for me, I was Spanish speaking, and Latinos just in general love to talk about God. And so I don't know, I just felt like I was approaching people who love to talk about God. And so that was more natural. But getting to the point where we're like, no, listen, like this is why you're wrong. And this is why we're right. Like that was a hard thing. It was always a hard thing.
They are very agreeable. I mean, because Latinos, I mean, they do. If you talk about God, they'll agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. If you say I have a message about God, then they're like, oh, come. And I'm going to make you all the things. And you'll be here for 3 hours. And I love them so much.
I always loved Latin prayers. I mean, Spanish prayers. Yes. Like they say Padre so many times. It's like every sentence is like, Father, and we ask for this, and Father, we're so grateful for this. And that was like a tradition I always brought back until ... But so, I love how thoughtful you both were in your missions. Like I was just a dumb. Oh yeah, this is what we do. I guess it's right then. And Andrew, I'm listening to you, and I'm like, those thoughts never crossed my mind ever on the mission.
And that's like, I kind of had to just revert back to my story, which is like, hey, I stopped going to church for like a year and everything kind of spiraled out of control. But then I went back and then everything started working out. So, this is my story that I'm telling you, and maybe the church can help you too. Like that was basically kind of what I fell back to, because I was just like, if I'm out here to help people come to Christ, it's going to be because of me. Like it's going to be because of, and not because of me, like the Spirit, right? Yeah. But because of my personality, what I bring to the relationship that we have with those people, right? And so that's kind of what I fell onto. I was not a run-of-the-mill missionary, you could say. We could go through my mission pictures and it'd be very apparent. But it was good though.
Good.
I want to say something really fast about mine, and I think it might be a theme throughout this podcast episode. But I remember being afraid, And I think I was considered amongst my, I don't know, peers as one who really believed in God, and I wasn't ever going to waver. And I remember going into my bishop, my singles ward bishop, I think it was like a week or two before I was supposed to report to the MTC. So I got my call in May, the beginning of May, and I didn't report until the end of August. So I had like 4 months to try and find a husband, right? And anyway, I went into my bishop and I was like, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. Like in my mind, I was like, okay, who has stewardship over me? Who has a right to receive revelation for me? My bishop does. I'm going to go talk to my bishop. And so I went to my bishop and I was like, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. And he looked at me. I was so frustrated, but he's like, Katie, I can't tell you whether or not you're supposed to serve a mission, but I can promise you won't regret it. And I realized in that moment that it was really my choice. It wasn't like this, God, what am I supposed to do? It was like, okay, this is a good choice. And because of that, I'm going to go on this mission. And even with like my background, like with my family, with how I was raised, with my friends, there were so many times I wanted to go home. So many times. And I never thought that was going to be me. I'm not going to go home for a mission. There were so many times I wanted to go home, not mainly because it was just hard. I really struggled with loving myself on my mission. But anyway, my point is that like for me, in my experience, in very pivotal moments of my life, like God hasn't been a God that said, this is what you're supposed to do, or else you're never going to make it. It was more like, for me, my relationship with God has been, let me know your options and, you get to choose them. Like I gave you this gift of agency and I'm going to support you in whatever you decide. Anyway.
That's great. Well, I think we could talk about missions. All four of us having served missions, we could talk about it forever.
Yeah.
Alas, this is a marriage podcast, so I think maybe we should get to the marriage. So you meet, you fall in love, you get married, blah blah blah. All right. Yep. So,
what year did you get married?
2013.
2013.
Awesome. So you get married, and then you have more questions.
Well, okay. I just want to quickly ask for both of you, what was it that you were looking for, and what was it that you both found attractive in each other?
I always told.
I have no idea what he's going to say right now.
Yeah, you do. I always told my friends once we were engaged, I think, they asked me similar questions. What do you like most about Katie, or why is it that you were drawn to her or whatever? And I just said, I was tired of dating girls and I wanted to date a woman.
Ooh.
That is a strong statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she's what, 7 years, 7 months older than me. So that's kind of the joke when people find out that she's older than me, but it's true. I mean, I just wanted somebody that would be a great mom and a super good friend to me and was beautiful and didn't judge me for loving video games. And literally, I think it was on our second date, she said, "You know what I love about you? I love that that you play video games, but you're normal. You're not socially awkward,
There were a few other things I said about that. I'm glad you didn't say them.
Yeah.
But yes.
But yeah, that was it. She just was a great woman.
How about for you, Katie, after you stopped blushing?
I know. It's because I was afraid he was going to say something.
Those are embarrassing blushes.
Right. I remember sitting down after my mission and I was like, hey, I got serious about marrying somebody. And well, what do I want? What do I really want in a spouse? And I wrote down a list of things. And one of the first things was just that he loved God and that he loved me. I honestly don't remember what the rest of the list was, but those were things that when I met Andrew and we started talking and just sharing our lives with each other, it was just okay, he loves God and he's pretty into me, which is great too.
Still am.
Both super important things. I look back at the times like in Young Women's where they would have us write down a journal entry and list all of the qualities we wanted. And, and I remember when Allan and I got engaged, I gave him the book that like I had written all of those things in. No man can live up to that. Not one. So
hey, I'm tall. That was on the list, right?
Yeah, I did like the tall athletic guys, but
1 for 30. Nailed it.
But the rest, and now, man, has that list dwindled because I'm mature.
Well, your list has changed too.
My list has changed for sure. Oh.
Absolutely.
Anyway, okay, so Andrew, I wanted you to take us through a little bit about your dad and kind of what happened with him to your faith transition.
Yeah, and how those two tie together for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we found out, I got home in April of 2011. And then I found out in February of 2012 that my dad had been diagnosed with cancer. He had gotten, he started to have a tooth pain in one of his wisdom teeth. My dad was a huge man. He was 6'5", like this big burly dude. And he had a huge head. That's why my head's so huge and our kids' heads are so huge. And so he had lots of room for his wisdom teeth. So he never got his wisdom teeth taken out. And one of them was bothering him. And so he went to the dentist to have it looked at. And they just decided, well, if it's bugging you, we'll just pull them out. And so when they went to pull that particular tooth out, it came out with almost no resistance. And the dentist was like, that's not right. And so they looked underneath it and they ended up sending it to the lab and, found out that there was a little tumor about the size of a pea that was growing just in the roof of his mouth behind that tooth. And it was diagnosed as malignant mucosal melanoma. And I don't remember the stats that the doctors gave him, but he was one in, millions of people that have been diagnosed with that kind of.
Wasn't it stage 4 at that point?
I don't know. I never learned the stages or anything of cancer. Like I just, maybe the stages of grief, but.
Right.
Yeah. So we found that out, and he started on treatments. They had a bunch of different treatments at the University, the Huntsman Cancer Institute. They had a bunch of different new treatments that he tried. Initially, they gave him, I think, 6 months to live. And then once they came out with some of these treatments that they said he was a good candidate for, it ended up stretching his life out about two and a half years from when he was diagnosed. Katie and I got married in 2013, and then we had our first son in September
2014.
Of 2014.
Not 2013.
Yeah. And then my dad passed away at the end of October that year. So he got to hold our oldest son a couple times while he was in bed, really sick. And then he passed away about a little less than 2 months after our first son was born. And it was really cool, honestly. We talked about it a lot as a family, like knowing that you don't have much time left and how differently you can live your life because of that. My dad loved to travel. And so one of his life insurance policies, he made sure he got a clause in there. I can't remember what the name of the clause is. We ended up getting it too with ours, but that if he's diagnosed with a terminal illness, that he can take out, I think it's like 80% of his life insurance policy early. And so he did that. And then he took his family on vacations and he fixed everything in the house so that my mom didn't have to worry about anything after he was gone. And he put in concrete where there was gravel on the side of the house. And he did everything he possibly could to make sure that everything was just right for after he was gone. And he spent more time with us. And I don't know, life was just a little bit more meaningful when we knew that we weren't going to have him for much longer, And so it really was kind of a neat experience. I mean, I think I've told people that I think I'd almost prefer to know when somebody that I love is gonna die, because it gives you time to say things that you don't usually say, And I mean, we say I love you all the time, and we say it to our kids all the time. And I think that's one reason why, like, I don't know that my dad told me that he loved me all the time. He showed me, and I know he did. But I think because of the last few years of his life, and him telling us more frequently, that we've kind of passed it on to our kids. So, but I remember specifically at the funeral, I talked, I think I still have them in my car, the CDs from the funeral of what we spoke about, but I gave a talk, and I remember saying that I was grateful that the church has taught us that we can be together forever, and that we decided as a family to be drawn closer together instead of be kind of torn apart, and be angry at God for, why this might have happened to us. And I mean, the fact that it was skin cancer was, my dad thought it was pretty ironic, just because he was the one that when we went to the lake at Lake Powell, he had a shirt on and a huge Indiana Jones hat, and he put on, he just made sure that he was not going to get sunburned, because he hated to get sunburned, and then he ends up getting skin cancer in his mouth somehow. And he was just he was such a happy guy, and he kind of took it lighthearted. People that came to visit him when he was sick always left saying, like, he's so happy. Like, I go to, like, try to comfort him, and then he ends up just making me feel better and asking about my family. And he was such a good guy, and I looked up to him so much. But I remember that's when I really started to wonder, am I going to see my dad again? And I really wanted to know, I got to figure this out. I got to figure out if, because it was really hard for me, going back to me talking about, I liked to imagine things and picture them in my mind realistically. It was hard for me to imagine what it was going to be like seeing my dad again on the other side, and so that's when I really started to question things. Up until that point with our marriage, I mean, we read the scriptures every day together, and we read the scriptures every day on our own, listen to talks. I mean, we were like,
we always talked about it, like what we learned. And
yeah, I mean, we were all in. And I wanted to make sure, especially with my dad, like, we knew that, if we do everything the way we should, we will get blessings, right? And so that was another reason why, I wanted to be extra diligent in gospel things, because I wanted to make sure that, our prayers were answered. And, my dad was given a blessing in the very beginning that said, the priesthood was how God created the earth, and that's how you can be healed too. And so we were all kind of hoping that that was going to be the case, and yeah.
I started to question, and there was also like depression, just going through grief. That was a really hard time. And like my just not knowing how to help him or what to do. And
yeah, I don't know if I didn't mention, I think we talked about it before, but my dad was 47. I'm the oldest. And I was 25 when he died. So it was definitely too soon, too young.
How do I be a dad?
Yeah. How do I, that was something that I still ask today, like, I really wish I could just ask my dad, like, what did you do in this scenario when I was, we're going to frame some of our basement this weekend, and man, he would be great to have here for that. But yeah, the depression really started, I don't know. I mean, how many years in? to our marriage did I mean, was it right after that?
Lincoln was 1 when it was really bad. Oh, I mean, like, what is that? 2 years.
Did you ever seek for help when you realized? Did you realize you were depressed, or did you think you were just sad from your dad's death, and then did you seek help for it?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think in the moment I did. Like the first several months, I probably was just in denial. I think I just thought that it was kind of my way of, being sad was okay. I didn't end up going to see a therapist until years later, though.
Yeah, I remember we tried to so we lived in an apartment, and then we moved into our own townhome, and then we sold our townhome after his dad died, like almost a year after he died, because we just wanted to be closer to family. Because I could see that Andrew was struggling. We wanted to be closer to family. We were like an hour away, 45 minutes to an hour. And so we decided to move in with his mom and his sister. And a month after we moved in, found out that I was pregnant with our second. So we had a 1-year-old, and I was newly pregnant with our second, and sick and tired. And I think the depression got worse as we were there. So, 2 years into our marriage. And so for a time I remember he says this to me. He's like, I would ask him like, oh, what did you learn in your scripture study today? And he would be like, I just feel like you're nagging me about this. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, we've always talked about God. We've always talked about what we were studying. Like, I'm not trying to nag you, like something's not right here, and he did mention he played video games. I remember him telling me at times, like, I just play them because it's the only way I feel like I can escape from reality right now. And and I'm there with like my 1-year-old, my pregnant self. And then I have this newborn baby who's got acid reflux, and I'm trying to keep him quiet and just all of this stuff. And I'm like trying to like take this burden off of him, And we got to the point where we're like, okay, I remember sitting in our bedroom and just saying like, look, like we've done all that we know how to do, and it's getting worse. And this is also with regards to things that he struggled with. So not just depression. But I'm like, and if it's getting worse, like we need to go out, like outside of us, because we can't just keep doing the same things and expect it to get better. So we went to the bishop. The bishop's like, I'm not a therapist. So he sent us to therapy together. That wasn't good.
The bishop said, I'm not a therapist.
Yes.
That is a great bishop right there.
We loved him. He
Bravo,
was
Bishop.
Yeah.
So he's like, but and he was a new bishop. He'd been newly called. He's like, but I've been like, we just encourage you to go as couples. So we went as a couple, not a good fit with a therapist. I kind of was like, our marriage is great. Like, it's just like, he's having a hard time right now. So I kind of think he needs to go. He ended up talking with a friend who'd had a really good therapist. So he went to that therapist. And then it wasn't until probably 3.5 years into our marriage that he started on medication. And that really helped. It took a little bit, but it really just helped to kind of, his therapist had said like big, we're not therapists, but big life events can have the effect of turning off a switch in our mind that allows us to feel. And medication can help turn that switch back on. Because for Andrew, he was just like, I just don't feel anything. I don't feel anything when I read my scriptures. I don't feel anything when I go to church. I just don't feel anything. But feeling a lot of sadness, I guess. It felt like the negative feelings, but not the positive ones.
I remember that was one of the things that I told her was that, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about death. I was thinking frequently, like, what would happen if I got hit by a car today and died? Like, what would happen to the boys and to my wife? And it was just a depressing thought. And I was also just thinking, I've got to figure out if all of this is real, if all of this is true in regards to the church, because if I'm thinking about this constantly, like I've got to figure it out.
But for you, it was more God before.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily the church. It was just the idea of a life after this in any form. And I know for a lot of people, it's, the truth claims of the church is what ends up breaking their shelf and them, looking into things and then them end up, going away. But for me, it was, I started with science, and I started with learning about other religions, and I read. I always want to call him Carl Sagan, but he's not Carl Sagan. The new Carl Sagan.
Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins,
Neil
deGrasse Tyson. There you go.
Yeah. New Carl Sagan. I've read some of his books, Stephen Hawking, and these other just geniuses, and learning, the scientific side of things. And then as I read, and I would go, because I hadn't really been reading the scriptures a lot in this depression time, and then I would go back to the scriptures when I was reading a lot of these scientific things and some of the historical Christian kind of books, and I would compare, and I would read it with a critical eye. And every time I read the Book of Mormon, I read it with a critical eye, and I was putting myself in the shoes of somebody who was on the other side that didn't believe, and so I did. That's when I did a lot of studying and searching, and that was when there's a lot of Katie getting frustrated
and nagging apparently.
Well, no, she wanted to know. She's like, you keep saying that you're figuring this out.
What does that mean?
Yeah, and I don't see you figuring it out, Andrew. I don't see you doing that.
And I said to him, I was like, you're not reading your scripture, so you're pretty much guaranteed that you're not going to know that they're true. You're not even reading them. And he's like, but if I read them, I'm like super critical of them. And I just was in this like, maybe more orthodox in this way mindset of like, well, you got to read your scriptures to know that they're true. You've got to say your prayers to know that God is real. Like, you've got to go to church. You've got to go to the temple. You've got to do these things. And I will say, I put a lot of the blame on I know I didn't mention it before, but struggled with pornography. And so I put a lot of the blame on that. Like, oh, it's just numbing your spirit, and that's why this is so hard for you. And I think I just kind of fought this faith crisis, I guess, in my husband, because I wasn't understanding it. I hadn't seen people, I don't know, question things that way, and I'm not my husband. Like, of course, not my husband. He's just, his dad died and he's struggling with pornography. And this is why all these things are happening. And it's okay, because one day he won't anymore. So I'm just going to remind him he's supposed to read his scriptures and say his prayers, because we're linked together eternally. And so I've got to make sure that, he's doing these things. And anyway, I also was in a really tough mindset.
She was in a bad spot. I mean, it was not easy for her with the kids and trying to keep them quiet at my mom's house and stuff. But
oh, I know I know people love their mother-in-law. I love mine, but still living with other people is very difficult, especially with kids. It is. And
you're always self-conscious of, am I being a nuisance?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think also that was just an interesting place for us. Like, everything just came together all at once. It's like we moved to be closer to family, but then we were in the dark almost. Like, we're living in the basement. Like, we don't have any friends. Like, we're in this ward where, most people are established families, not young married couples with their new children. It was just a very different.
It was weird.
Place.
It was like a pre-2020.
It was weird, but I think there are all these different aspects, but also the fact that I didn't feel like I had people I could go to. I didn't want to be sharing what he was struggling with everybody. And it got to the point where I finally was like, can I talk to some people about this? Because I just need to get it out. I remember calling my mission president and I was like, I don't know what to do right now. I'm just so sad and I don't know what to do. And he told me, we had a long conversation, but he said, you need to work on you and your feelings and where you're at. And you need to let Andrew work on him. And then together you work on your marriage. You don't need to fix Andrew and Andrew doesn't need to fix you. He doesn't need to fix your sadness and you don't need to fix his addiction. You work on those things separately and then together, just get together and work on your marriage. And it wasn't that we ever thought our marriage was bad. We just had these things we were struggling with. And I think that also has been a theme for me throughout all of his experience, his journey. Just okay, you can work on you and I can work on me and we can still be totally strong and love each other and make it through, I guess. I don't know.
No, that's a good point, because I think that when you're dealing with your own depression, you can call it anything, new baby. I mean, just your own woes of life. It can feel amplified in your own marriage, right? So sometimes you tend to, shy away from talking or working on that marriage because there's so much going on within yourself individually that you can just like turn yourself off to the other person or feel responsible for the other person's feelings. So that was really good advice by your mission president.
This follow-up may be jumping in the timeline a smidge, but Katie, I wanted to ask you, like, was there a moment, like, at what point, and maybe that's over a span of time, that you kind of recognized that what Andrew was going through as far as wrestling with his faith wasn't actually directly tied to issues of pornography or a lack of effort on his part? Or did you come to that realization? I don't know.
No, that's a good point. I don't know if I did. I can say there was a time where things were really like tough with pornography, and I kind of like let him know where I was at. I was out of the country. It's probably the only time I've maybe yelled at my husband. I was really upset. And I came home from this trip out of the country. This was 2 years ago, this next February. And I think that was a turning point for us because I came home from that. We had a big conversation. We talked about where he was with God. He had told me before that he didn't know if he believed in God and had asked me, like, have you ever like considered the idea that God might not exist? And I'm like, no. But that I think just his opening up to me more about what was going on in his head allowed me to see like, oh, he is working through this. And I guess for me, if you know my husband, you know that he's an honest man. Like he is a man of pure integrity. And that also means that he wants to be true to himself. He won't do something if he doesn't feel that it's who he is. Which is why he doesn't dance with me, but it's fine. But my point is that for him to come to that conclusion, like, I don't believe in God, like that means that's really where he's coming from. He's not just like throwing the idea out there because he's just like, man, I just don't believe in God. I just don't want to go to church anymore. Like he'd really, and he still does. I mean, he's still learning and processing things and finding what feels right for him. And I think that also opened up the opportunity for me to be more, not that I wasn't authentic, but just like, okay, I can talk about these things too, where I'm at, and it's okay that we're not on the same page. Yeah.
So Andrew, thank you, Katie. Andrew, let's tie that in then to where your journey kind of took you to. Obviously, there's not a conclusion because, like Katie mentioned, we're always still learning. But when did you kind of end up saying, okay, this is now what I believe about the church, or what I believe about God, or this no longer works for me? When was that kind of moment of that's it?
I think it was almost 2 years ago when she came back from that trip to Peru. And I think that's when I told you, right?
That's when we like really had a real deep conversation.
Yeah,
I think.
And I
yeah. What did you tell her?
I think I told her, like, I think I've kind of settled on the idea that I hope that there's something after this, but I am leaning more towards I don't think that there is. Mm-hmm. I don't think I believe in God. It'd be great, but I don't think I do. And that's when, the tears flow. And
I cue my 23-year-old self who wrote that he needed to love God,
yeah,
right? Like,
right.
Where has everything gone? Like,
and
this
then
is our marriage.
But in her eyes, I'm basically telling her our ceiling means nothing to me anymore. Then what does that mean for our marriage? What do we teach our kids? Everything just unravels.
Blessings.
And your whole foundation of your life just unravels in these few words. And it was hard. And we talked late into the night, and it turned into months of just daily discussions about different things, where we're at. And
I think, can I mention that too? I think it's been really helpful for me. and I know that this isn't necessarily what everybody gets to experience, but for me, like Andrew's very respectful of what I believe, and I try to be respectful of what he believes. And I think that that allows for more open communication, not like fearing that the other person is like, oh, but I'm hearing you and I'm listening, but that's not right. Kind of like I was doing to people when I was a teenager. Yeah, but you're not really right, you know? But like just knowing that like we trust each other on such a deep level that it's okay that we don't believe the same, but we can love each other and our each other's beliefs and respect them. I think that that's huge. And I think that's been a huge thing for us in learning to love and accept other people around us. I feel like we've been pretty accepting of people, but I look back and I'm like, man, like my teenage self was more judgmental than I thought she was, you know, like, man, I really like haven't had a place for other people, because in the back of my mind, I'm just saying, yeah, but you're not really right. You know, I'm really right.
Well, I feel like that's one of the things that as I kind of did my research and I was trying to figure things out, I realized I'd been brought up in this black and white world where we have all the truth and we need to tell everybody else about the truth. And if you do this, then it's a sin. Like there was always like a line, you know, in the sand, and there was always black and white. And I found out that there's a lot more gray to life and to decisions and to marriage and than all these things that we were ever taught. I mean, I feel so awful about so many different things that I've said over the years. I saw somebody in one of the interviews I was watching a few months ago wear a shirt that said, "I'm sorry for all the things I said when I was Mormon."
I've seen that shirt.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's how I feel with so many things, because I'm like, I'm on like the total opposite side with so many different things now, because I've been able to kind of take this time to put myself in other people's shoes and really, really try to do that. And not just, pretend, but really try to imagine, I've got one of my best friends is gay. And I remember him telling me, that was a really big turning point for me too, when I was trying to figure things out. I remember him telling me, imagine that somebody told you that you couldn't be with Katie and still, be righteous or whatever, be worthy. And it kind of hit me, and I was just like, that would suck, but, I was raised in a house where my dad was borderline homophobic, and so to be able to put myself in his shoes, it really flipped things. And that's when I was able to start putting myself in the shoes of Muslims and Jews and all these different people around the world in different situations. And that's how I was kind of able to analyze, like, okay, well, does God answer my prayers? Does God answer the prayers of somebody in Somalia who's starving to death? And I don't know. I just started to realize that there's so much more in between, and that, if we could just spread a little more gray and compassion, that, right. That there's not always one answer to everything,
Yeah.
I'm picking up on something. I want to ask both of you this kind of the same question. You believe differently now, right? Andrew, we just heard a little bit into your process of getting into other people's shoes. So maybe we'll ask you first, Katie. When you look at what Andrew now believes, how do you see that benefiting him? And what positives do you see in what Andrew's current belief system is or is not?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it just goes back to like his journey, and what he's come to now has really opened up his mind to being more compassionate. Like we see other people and we're like, we want, like, we go out to dinner with somebody and, they get some alcohol, and it's like, we're like literally not judging you. Like, I don't want you to think that like we're sitting here like, oh my gosh, why are you drinking alcohol? Like, you're a good person, And maybe that's something that I grew up with though too, like with my family.
Sure.
But I don't know. I remember deciding when I was a teenager that I didn't ever want to raise a family in Utah. because I didn't like the culture even as a teenager. And this is a big statement. Sorry.
Sorry, there you are.
Born and bred. But I didn't want to, because I wanted my kids to have diversity. I wanted them to grow up where not everybody was of the same faith, but then choosing different things. Mainly just because that's how I grew up. And it was always weird to me that Andrew didn't like understand things the same way. But I think now, like, we've both opened up to just really, like, from the heart, like, loving people without this, like, but you're supposed to be different. But I'm going to love you right now, but you're supposed to be different. Do you know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah. Andrew, I mean, same question to you. You talked a lot about putting yourself in other people's shoes. Put yourself in Katie's shoes. Especially what differs between your belief and hers? How do you feel like Katie's beliefs are a benefit to her, or actually a big strength, even though they're different than yours?
She's always been super charitable, and she always it's just in her nature. She just reaches out to other people and helps them. And, but she has this love of God. She just wants to do the right thing. And I think it's one of those things that for her, it's God helping her to know what to do, and his influence in her life to be able to make these decisions and to know who to reach out to, and to do those things. And so, I don't see any problem with, as an unbeliever, I don't see any problem with somebody still believing, because, I see that it obviously is a benefit to a lot of people. And, you talk about things not working for me anymore, like you don't throw out harsh words when you say things to your spouse that's still believing. You want to say things like, this isn't working for me anymore, but like it works for her, and it's a huge benefit. Like, she talks about how she's like, I just need to take the sacrament, because she didn't get to, because it was state conference about 2 weeks ago. And she got to go this last Sunday and take the sacrament and feel rejuvenated, and that's awesome. I don't ever want to take away from that. I always will hold a place to be able to discuss my journey and what I've been through and the things that I've learned. I mean, we could have a whole podcast episode about, the different things that we've learned, and maybe that's for John DeLynn to unwrap, but
not
but it's
quite our 7-hour format, is it?
I know, right? He likes to do the long. I think that if somebody wants to believe in God and it makes them be a better person, more power to them. Like, who am I to try to take you away from that? And if you want to hear my story, then I'll tell you my story. But I don't think anyone should go around saying, hey, you're ignorant, or how can you believe this? Like, that's just not nice.
If you have a question.
Well, no, I was going to say, Katie, it's really beautiful to see you get emotional when he says that. What does that mean to you?
Now, a reminder, we can see the webcam.
We can
no one
see
else
the webcam.
Can. You're not being very loud about it.
No.
Yeah, what are you feeling? Talk about it. If you can, if you want.
No, it's sweet to me. For lack of a better word, I guess. Because I feel like a lot of this journey, and I think it really depends on the perspective, but there have been moments in the journey where I've just felt like things just keep getting taken away from me. Blessings, tithing, like temple attendance, like just different things. And that's one way to look at it, right? And I think we just naturally as humans have a tendency to see what we don't have anymore. But it's also just beautiful to see, like, that doesn't mean that he doesn't still love me and respect me for where I'm at. And it's not that it's not like this is the first time we've talked about this. It's just like really sweet to hear it said, I guess, for the masses. I'm thinking about, like, I'm looking at my notes and how I wrote about like getting a life coach and how it was, honestly, I think it was like right around this time last year that I reached out to a friend who I knew was a coach, and I was like, I don't know like what this even means, but can I do a session with you? And whatever that means. And so I ended up, like, she ended up being my coach. And I remember I had come to her with these different things that were hard for me with our difference in beliefs. And there was one in particular, there's like this really silly thing, but there was, just to give an example, like, I really don't like video games. Poor Andrew. He said that I loved him even though he had like played video games, but I don't like them. And I remember bringing it to her one day because I was so irritated with it. And because I wanted him to be different. I wanted him to not play video games so much. Like, don't spend so much time on them. And the principles were just that I wanted him to be different than he was. And I could be okay right now, but I would be happier if he were different. And she said to me, like, what if people are in our lives just so we can learn to love them and love them right now for who they are? And this overarching principle, like in our marriage, right? Like, I get to love you right now, like, even while you're playing video games, like, I get to love you, and I get to love you with you not believing in God, and I get to love you with like these differences in the way we approach life sometimes. Like, I don't have to wait for that day when we're standing before God and we get to go live in the celestial kingdom. Like, I can love you right now, and you don't have to be different. Anyway.
I think that that's a really nice way to maybe even just help you change your mindset about what's happening. That one thing that's irritating you, you know. And speaking of like living in the moment and loving people for who they are right now, that's what you did with your dad, right? For the last couple years of his life. And you talk about how much that means and that meant to your family, because that was just time well spent, right? You knew you had that much time left. So Andrew, I want to ask, I think people will be thinking, how do you talk to your family or tell your mom or your siblings about where you're at after have gone through something that was so, difficult with losing your dad, and probably a lot of feelings of celestial families wrapped up into that can be really painful for the families, and it can be painful for you in processing that. So have you told them, and how did you go about talking about it?
Well, for some of them, we'll send them a link to this podcast.
Hi, family.
Yeah. So I've talked with, my mom left the church 2 years ago. She told me she did about 2 years ago, and it's probably wrong, but she's actually in the Tightrope group. We didn't know this until a few weeks ago. But
yeah.
Hello,
welcome.
Yeah. So she, I talked with her about it about a year ago when she told me that she'd left. We've told my brother and his wife, and then so all my siblings know. But I sat down. We had them over for dinner for Sunday, and we just talked with them about where I'm at and kind of what I've been reading and doing, and what I believe now. And my brother's wife, I just remember her saying, like, that's awesome. Like, you really seem like you are searching for truth, and that's great. And if you feel happy and you guys are in a good spot, then more power to you, And I ended up having to send my sister a text because she was quarantining because of different reasons, and she just said, "I love you. Like, it doesn't matter to me if what you believe. Like, I'll always love you." And then I talked with my youngest sister, who has also left the church, and it was something that we were able to bond over a little bit, just as the oldest, and then her as the youngest, and there being like 12 years in between us. I mean, there's a big gap, and we don't have a ton in common, and so it was kind of cool to share our stories each and to be able to come together that way. But I haven't really told any of my other family members. There's a lot of close friends that I've talked with about, but I don't think you've told any of your family, have you?
My sisters, no. My brother.
Seems like that's news to you, Andrew.
Well, this is such a difficult subject. It sounds like, especially with your sister, there's healing happening, Andrew, with you and your family, which is really helpful, right? And hopefully that will just get better as time goes on. And then, Katie, I'm sure, hopefully this episode definitely helps with people understanding where you're at and where you're coming from, because we can both tell and feel just how hard you've worked on your own marriage to get to where you are now. What about the mixed faith marriage is still hard? I know you have 2 young kids. Have you discussed what the future looks like with them?
Andrew has wanted to discuss it. We haven't sat down and really talked about it.
You haven't.
Have you sat down and talked about it with me?
No.
Oh.
So I've actually several times when it's just been me and the boys, we have little teaching moments. They'll be watching something on the TV and they're I'll use segues. So there might be somebody on the TV that's speaking a different language or something. And I'll say, is it weird if somebody says, words that you don't understand that speaks a different language? And they'll say no. It's kind of weird. And I'll be like, well, is it bad that they speak a different language? No. Okay. I'm like, well, what if somebody didn't believe in God? Would that make them
a bad person?
And they both, they're 6 and 4, but my 6-year-old was like, no, that doesn't make them a bad person. And so we just have these little cute conversations where I've kind of introduced to them the ideas that, just because somebody has a different skin color or speaks a different language or believes something that you don't believe, it's okay. We can still be friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about how, I don't pray anymore. Sometimes Porter, my youngest son, Porter, will say, it's Daddy's day to pray. And I'll be like, no, I'm not going to say the prayer. And then my older son, Lincoln's like, yeah, because Daddy doesn't say prayers anymore.
They pick on it real quick.
And kids are resilient, man.
Yeah.
Kids are resilient. It's likely not ever going to be a problem for them.
Yeah.
The problem, it's not going to be a problem that you believe differently than each other.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. It's funny. I just had the same conversation with the kids the other day about skin color and still loving people and talking about how we're different and we believe differently and we still talk about it. But I guess the part that we haven't solidified on how we want to approach it is teaching the lessons of the church, the gospel versus not. We haven't really approached that. You did ask what were hard things for us. For me, one is just when I need when I want a blessing, because I love blessings. And then I have to call up somebody in the ward, I have to call somebody else up in the ward, and then they sit there while my husband sits there, and then I don't know what they're thinking, but I don't want to explain it to them. I just want a blessing. But I also don't want people, I guess this is one part that and maybe you have felt this way too. I don't want people to think that because we have different beliefs that they need to feel sorry for us. I want to say, it is so beautiful and it is so wonderful and it's hard, but guess what? The hard things can bring us closer together. Not that I loved when he would relapse, but I loved the conversations that came afterwards when we were just so raw and vulnerable and we could just grow closer to one another. And I've told him when I'm having a hard time, when he's I don't want to pay tithing anymore. And I'm crying, but I'm it's okay that I'm crying and you don't have to make me feel better and I can be sad. And this is just this is a good, clean pain. And I'm not going to run away from you with it. I'm going to stay close to you and we're going to talk about it. And and in that, I just think that we're provided so many opportunities to just
come closer to one another. And I love that. Like, love it so much. Anyway.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I've listened to your guys' views on some of these things about how, some people are very well-meaning and they say certain things like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Katie, that must be so hard for you." Like I'm just like this deadbeat all of a sudden, and I don't know. I think it's pretty. Besides me not being there at church.
Nobody's at church.
Nobody's at church anyway. But besides that, like people don't see me doing things anymore. They're not in my house every day, so they don't see me the way that I treat my kids. They don't see me wrestling and tickling them and having a good time and every now and again getting mad at them. But I mean, they don't see the way that I treat my wife. They don't know. They just assume that,
he's gone off the deep.
I'm just this.
We don't
crazy,
really know what they assume.
Yeah,
we assume that they assume these things.
Yeah, or that and I've been pretty open with people about my struggle with pornography over the years, and so I think there are probably some people that are just like, well, he probably just wanted to not feel guilty about looking at porn all the time, and just for the record, ever since
that big conversation,
not an issue. It's weird how. When suddenly something isn't like this, like, oh, can't do that thing. If you look at that, like that's cross the line and that's bad. And like all of a sudden it's like the curiosity is gone and it's not a big deal anymore.
Right.
And so it's kind of like the shackles were broken when I was able to be completely open with my wife about what I believe. And then all of a sudden that guilt that I was programmed to feel all growing up, excuse me, was taken away, and it was like it wasn't even a thing anymore.
I think there's so much beauty in authenticity. I just think if we could be more authentic in our lives, speaking for myself as well in different areas, but like we would be able to see the hard times as formative experiences. I've listened, part of my journey through this has been studying what Thomas McConkie teaches.
Yeah.
Like a big part of like where I'm at with my faith right now and my like desire to grow closer to God. Like, yes, some of the issues that Andrew brings up, like I see that they're hard, but I don't see them as issues because it's not like necessarily relevant to me. And that's not to push other people aside. But I just think like if I can focus on like my relationship with God, even if it seems different than what other people in my ward or in my state or in the church are trying to tell me that I should believe, like that's okay. Because I think that the God that I believe in wants me to be me, and he wants Andrew to be him. And any type of experience that we have can be formative and bring us closer, in my belief, bring us closer to him and who we really can be.
And just love and acceptance between the two of you. Mm-hmm. I really love what you just said. We want to wrap up with asking you the question, what advice would you give to any couple who are in this position, who are really struggling? Is there something that you would like to share that was helpful for you, or advice that would maybe be comforting or helpful to them?
So much. I mean, I think trying to find, obviously, if anyone's listening to this podcast, they're trying to find community, or they're trying to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and see what it's like. But I think that you just need to, like Katie said, love them where they're at. I mean, if you loved them when you got married and all of a sudden this shift in belief is happening, it's not like they're choosing to rip the foundation that built their lives down. They're not choosing that. It's happening to them. And so be there for them while it happens, and try your best, even, as the believing spouse anyway, try your best to to listen and to understand that it's painful for the person that is losing their faith, and it's painful for them. I feel like so often whoever is losing their faith or changing their faith is pinned as the bad guy, and a lot of people don't see that it's really hard to be the one on the couch while somebody else gives my wife a blessing, and to think like, what are they thinking, and then it's really hard to be somebody who can't give a blessing or, stand in a circle at a baby blessing anymore or something like that, and it's not the easy road. And so if both spouses can just love each other where they're at, realize that it's not easy for either of them, and to just realize that it gets better over time. Like it kind of like with some losing a loved one, like losing my dad, people said time will make it better. And I feel like it should be time will make it tolerable, because it's always painful, but I do feel like time will make it tolerable. And as you take day by day, you can just get better at it.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's like prominent in my mind right now is just letting yourself feel what it is to be hurt. Like it's okay on either side for it to hurt, and let, like, in a sense, let yourself grieve this life that maybe you thought you were going to have, whether you're the believing spouse or the non-believing spouse. Like, know that life is different for both of you. And I know because of people I've talked to this community, that one spouse or the other isn't always on board with like being okay right now. And maybe it's a lot more difficult because there isn't communication. Remember that like the other person doesn't need to change in order for you to be happy or in order for you to love them. Like you can be happy right now and you can be sad right now, and just don't try to, push it away and don't try to change somebody else. Let them be them, let them hurt, and just sit by their side and say, I love you. Like, I'm here for you. No matter what, we might not know what our life's going to look like in 10 years, but guess what? We didn't know what it was going to look like today, 10 years ago. And so it's okay for it to be different. We're just going to learn how to accept change together. Like, I'm grateful for what his journey has brought into my life and how I've been able to change in a way that like I thought I was doing pretty great at. Like I thought I was really compassionate. Like, and maybe I've still got a long way to go, but like I just think that my mind is a lot more open, and like let people be in their pain. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to save them. Like, why don't we just love them right now?
Katie, can you think of a better way to end the episode?
I can't. love people where they are right now.
Awesome. Other Katie. Oh, you shouldn't be known as other Katie. Katie in the spotlight. We'll say Katie in the spotlight. Thank you for that last message. That was great. And Andrew and Katie, thanks for joining us on Marriage on a Tightrope. Honestly, I love how just calm and cool and collected you are and how you communicate with each other. And I really feel like this was a great episode for all the listeners to get to know another couple that is going through something very similar to what they are going through. And I think that you've used your words very wisely to spread some great wisdom and compassion for everybody. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.